We will now have the prayer.
We begin this prayer with a form of prayer recited by some of the tribal communities in South Asia while launching an important venture, such as agricultural operations, hunting expeditions, and religio-cultural activities. The prayer has been translated from the vernacular to English. And I quote, "O God, Lord, just Lord, you are above, we are below. Our eyes do not see, your eyes see. We do not know anything, you know everything. You alone are our Father. Let our house and cultivation get plenty of blessings. Let there be blessing on children, sons, daughters. Let there be plenty of grain in the house. Let there be increase of cattle in the stable. Take care of whichever spirits we have overlooked. Do thou take care," unquote. As we know, the indigenous peoples are among the most marginalized and exploited of the world due to diverse political and socio-economic processes. The process of globalization partly plays a role in their plight, but the hallmark of the indigenous people's life and culture is their harmonious and symbiotic relationship with God, with one another, and with nature. There are more than 700 scheduled tribal groups across the country. It's not feasible to make a presentation on behalf of all 7, not 5 scheduled tribes. However, let me also clarify that there are common threads through these tribal groups, through their cultures, and therefore there are what we call in anthropology elements of universality, and also there are elements of particularity. There are certain things all these tribal groups have: social institutions, cultural institutions, but their expressions may be located or restricted to each of the tribal groups. And therefore, it's very commonly said about the tribes in India and across the world, in fact, concerning other indigenous communities also, there are as many tribal religions as there are tribes, because each tribal group has its own system, its own religious functionaries, etc. Therefore, that must be very clear to us. And therefore, whenever we say tribal religion or Adivasi religion, it's a generic term used for a number of tribal groups or Adivasi groups. However, each group, each ethnic community has its own religious system. Now, various religious traditions such as Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, and Christianity have their own distinctive worldviews regarding human fulfillment and human existence. In an Adivasi worldview, too, there is a notion of human fulfillment, but there are certain questions at the very outset I would like to raise so that we are attuned to the sensitivities of the tribals, to the worldview of the tribals, and we are able to understand what exactly they mean when they use certain jargons from tribal perspective. The first question is whether the fulfillment can be achieved if the dreams of Adivasis come true. What are these dreams? I'll explain. Will a sense of ultimate satisfaction, a state of desirelessness, a state of total liberation, and an accomplishment of a task either sacred or profane bring about real fulfillment in their life and in the life beyond? So talking of the life on this earth and also the life beyond, what in Christianity we call eschatological belief. These are the questions this presentation attempts to examine in the context of the Indian tribes, especially the major tribes of Jharkhand. It tries to explore the Adivasi's sense of longing for land that is so very crucial, not only for their physical existence, but also for their encounter with the supernatural forces. That's why there is a popular saying, land for an Adivasi is life. Take his land and you have taken away his life. So while the metaphor of Jharkhand, therefore I'm using the metaphor of Jharkhand, which is newly carved out state, the state carved out from Bihar in the year 2000. So I'm using this metaphor and also would like to reflect on the theology of land for tribals shortly. So Jharkhand idealizes the tribe's concrete fulfillment on the earth in calm union with their own people. The promises of calm union with the ancestors in their afterlife is metamorphosed in the idea of parom disum or merkha, which means heaven. So these are the terms they use in some of the ethnic groups, parom disum or merkha in Urao tribe, which means heaven. So this presentation also tries to study the intimate interrelations and interconnection between longing and fulfillment and its interpretation in the context of some major proto-Australoid indigenous Adivasi groups from the state with their affiliation to the Dravidian and the Austric family of speeches. So now, as I've spelled out, this presentation comprises two dimensions of the dialectics between longing and fulfillment. One, longing for Satpati Raji, which is earth. Satpati Raji means earth, longing for the earth, longing for the land and its fulfillment in the state of Jharkhand. The ideology and concept of Jharkhand epitomizes Adivasi hopes and aspirations, dreams and visions, irrespective of its territorial integrity and identity. Hence, Satpati Raji or land or earth is filled not only with promises and fulfillment, but also with promises and challenges. The second section of this presentation will include the longing in Parom Disum or Merkha or the heaven, which is the abode of God and ancestors. Now, for an Adivasi, there is no fulfillment without longing. Longing and fulfillment are the two sides of the same coin. There is hope in longing. There is also frustration when the hopes are belied and the dreams shattered. Fulfillment is never devoid of longing. For all the major agriculturist Adivasis in Jharkhand, the longing and fulfillment can be understood as having plenty to eat and to drink. Cattle, crops, land, and children. That's why they talk in terms of happiness. I mean, happiness in terms of three components or completion of three of their dreams and aspirations. Three C's: cattle, crops, and children. Anything against this goal is a serious offense. Hence, offenses such as theft, adultery, murder, incest, false testimony, calumny, neglect of parents, and any violation of social customs are considered to be sinful. So, what does an Adivasi long for? Adivasis, irrespective of their racial affiliations, have two kinds of longing: personal and communitarian. At the personal level, they have the dreams which they try to make come true in their capacity as individuals, as members of the tribe, as members of the ethnic group. But at the level of the community, their longing is guided and determined by the collective faith experience of the community. So Adivasi fulfillment, either personal or collective, has two dimensions: this worldly and the otherworldly. While at the first level, an attempt is made to realize the networks of relationships with beings while still on earth, and at the second level, there is an effort to understand and interpret a synthesis of those human relationships with the divine in the life beyond. At both the levels, it is a matter of faith and one's own conviction, either individually or collectively. In fact, individuals receive their faith in and through the community. This is important. Communitarian dimension of their faith, because later on we shall say their salvation is also only through community, not individually. So their incorporation into the community ensures, through the process of socialization and enculturation, an inculcation of the ethos and values of the group. Now, coming to the first point, I said this presentation will include two parts. So I'm coming to the first part now. So far was a sort of preamble or orientation or introduction. Now, Adivasi fulfillment in Satpati Raji or this world. Satpati Raji means on this earth, this world. Happiness is the key to fulfillment. Happiness is the key to liberation or total emancipation. One cannot claim to be liberated without attaining happiness. Happiness is the criterion of a successful life, either here on earth or in the life beyond. For Adivasis, this happiness is collective. It is the collectivity that gives the individual a sense of achievement, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of direction, and a sense of accomplishment. This happiness for the Orang is articulated in terms of 3 C's, as I have just spelled out: cattle, crops, and children, as indicators of happiness and prosperity for their family. They even envisage their life after death as having plenty of fields to plow with lots of cattle, children, and bumper crop. Thus, the criteria of happiness are underlined very clearly in the Orang worldview. What is going to be like in the life after death is reflected in what it is now on this earth. The Munda, the Khadiya, the Santhal, and the Ho have similar criteria for their fulfillment. These are the 4 or 5 main tribes in Jharkhand. Actually, the Santhal is the biggest or largest tribal community in the country also. So they are basically agriculturists, and hence a longing for the land and a rich harvest is justified. The Khadiya have a special respect and reverence for cattle, and the latter are a part of their household as they are crucial to their survival. Children continue the generation of the parents. Every tribe looks up to them for its perpetuation. Therefore, children who are well versed into the norms and values of the tribe, those who can uphold the dignity and pride of the tribe, are always held in high esteem. The philosophy behind their love for the land manifests a network of relationships, both in this world and in the next. The Adivasi characteristics of simplicity, truthfulness, contentment, hard work, hospitality, generosity, independence, a carefree attitude, egalitarianism, and love for peace, etc., are indicative of their harmonious life. Thus, Swaras Prabhu, remember George Swaras Prabhu, is convinced that in the midst of individualism, greed, aggressive competition, and growing alienation from nature, the tribal values of solidarity with nature and egalitarianism should show others the way. The experience of harmony and solidarity with nature, neighbor, and the Supreme Being in Satpatti Raji is reflected in the longing for Jharkhand, a forest tract separate from the state of Bihar. Sorry. Now, longing for Jharkhand, the land of promise and fulfillment. Land-life symbiosis I spoke about some time back. Land is central to the tribe's existence. Without land, they simply do not exist. In the absence of land, there is no space for their social, cultural, economic, and ecological life. Sanjay Bosu Malik opines that identity of indigenous peoples rests on 2 vital elements: space and speech. Spatial habitat or the geographical territory of the ancestors is their birthright. That part of Mother Earth has been passed on to them by their foreparents. Therefore, the rationale for their struggle for a separate land can be justified in terms of 3 J's, namely Jal, Jungle, Zameen, land, forest, water, which belong to them from time immemorial. A rationale for Jharkhand's separate state is understood by CBCI Commission for Scheduled Castes and Tribes and Backward Classes in the memorandum submitted to the Honorable Prime Minister of India, then Prime Minister of India, Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, on 1st of October 2000 for declaration of Jharkhand state. Remember, Jharkhand was declared a separate state in the year 2000. Now, the highlights of the memorandum are, it's important to understand their psyche and their ethos. It is a demand for more than 100 years. 2, increasing exploitation and oppression of the tribal people. 3, inadequacy of past measures. 4, to safeguard Jharkhand identity. 5, Jharkhand rich land but poor people. And 6, Jharkhand not Vananchal. I'll not go into the details of the distinction between Jharkhand and Vananchal, because the concept of Vananchal was propagated by some vested groups with controversial ideological underpinnings. I'm not going into the details of that. But when we talk of land, the philosophy of land or theology of land in the context of tribals, we also talk of rape of the earth. For Adivasis, land, forest, and water belong to the Mother Earth, and they only enjoy usufructuary rights over them. Anybody cannot own them. They can neither be sold nor exchanged, nor can they be mortgaged or privatized. The social values that go along with their emotional bonds to land are egalitarianism in social life, symbiotic relationship with physical nature, participatory in performing arts, and harmony and coexistence in intercommunal living. I'm reminded of a famous saying by the Maori tribes in New Zealand, or the indigenous community in New Zealand are known as the Maoris. They say, and I quote, "We have not inherited the land, we have not inherited the earth from our ancestors, but we have borrowed it from our children," unquote. So this shows the significance of land for them, and not only land, not only in terms of restricted area or soil, but it's in terms of the entire cosmos, which has been given to them by the divine, so that they take care of the land, take care of this cosmos like stewards, so that they are able to hand it over to the coming generations, to their children, without any distortion or damage. So that's the meaning of that. However, according to a study as reported by Jaydas, every biosphere reserve in the country is on Adivasi land. Every major dam since 1970s has been submerging Adivasi land. Every wildlife sanctuary in India is on Adivasi homelands. Every national park is totally Adivasi. Of the mines in India, a majority, 90%, is on Adivasi land. Adivasi lands produce most of India's coal, bauxite, and mica. Almost 50% of the mineral wealth of India comes from Adivasi area. Yet 85% of the Adivasis are below the poverty line. They form 50% of those forcibly evicted from their homelands by national development projects, forming about 89% of India's people. The Adivasis predominate in about 20% of the most inhospitable, inaccessible, yet perhaps the richest tracts of the land. Yet only 1% have any legal recognition of their tribal lands or tribal rights. Now we'll enter into more philosophical and theological aspects of the tribal worldview. The permeating sacredness of the earth, the divine origin of the land and its stewardship by the tribes is an open secret. Singbonga is the name given for the supreme being of the Munda tribe. Dharmes is the supreme being of the Urao tribe. Kando Baba of the Santhal tribe. Pon Mesor of the Haria tribe. Thakurji also the Santhals. The gods of their respective tribes have given the land to the tribe to be taken care of. So this is the concept of land. The land has been given to them by the supreme being. Nirmal Minj, who recently died, Bishop Nirmal Minj, rightly points out that the personhood of Adivasis is rooted in their concept of land. From earth comes all sustenance to human beings and non-humans. No mind, no personhood of the Adivasis. Therefore, ownership of the land alienates it from the user. For the tribal land and forest, water and air and all nature's bounty are gifts of God. No king, no landlord, no government has ever created the land. Land was there from time immemorial, and the Adivasis have been using the gift as stewards and not as owners. On account of the Adivasi land symbiosis, land forms a major part of their being in terms of culture, religion, socio-cultural organization, philosophy, history, economy, and geography. An Adivasi honors, respects, reveres, and protects the land. The Adivasi intimacy with land results in a vast repository of knowledge of the flora and fauna, which have sustained them for centuries. The land forms the core of the education of the Adivasi to teach them how to exist in harmony with nature. So much so that a tree in the hamlet ceases to be merely a tree, but an important member of the village community. Remember, trees, animals, they are members of the Adivasi community. So also animals and birds. It is said No other community can understand the link between the Adivasi and the land than the one that knows and shares this sacred link of the Holy Land. For the Adivasi, their land is the Makkah of Islam, Jerusalem of the Christian, and the Jew, Jerusalem of the Christian and the Jew, and Bodh Gaya of the Buddhist. The sacredness permeates even the offspring of the land, the animals, birds, trees, rivers, and the people. Land gives the tribe a sense of dignity, pride, and identity. And an Adivasi, even with a small piece of land, will give his life to save it. But if he has no land, he can be utterly helpless, subservient, and subjugated like a bonded laborer, without any dignity. No wonder why there are so many resistance movements in the face of displacement due to the so-called development projects in Jharkhand. Ideologically, tribal identity is articulated in terms of geographical, historical, ecological, linguistic, and other features. Adivasis are basically peace-loving people, but if their self-esteem is hurt, they can be dangerous. Most of the developmental projects in Jharkhand have an adverse impact on the socio-religious system of the tribes, as their sarnas or sacred groves, or sarnas are translated as sacred groves, and sasans as burial places of their ancestors, and the various spirits associated with their religious life, in their opinion, cannot be rehabilitated. So intimate is the relationship between nature and Adivasi that the influence of the former has penetrated the very ethos and worldview of the Adivasis. They have evolved norms, values, beliefs, and practices, and other socio-cultural mechanisms which regulate the use of the natural resources around them in a way that is always sustainable. Their worldview is cosmocentric and not anthropocentric. Nature, man, and spirit form a complex and are interlinked. In such a worldview, where nature, human, spirit form an integral whole, there is no I and the other dichotomy. Nature is part and parcel of the human spirit complex, and human spirit is not independent of nature. What spontaneously follows from this relation is reverence for life. That is precisely why there have been so many movements, either cultural, social, agrarian, or political, whenever there are attacks of the aliens on the tribal life support system, resulting in Adivasi impoverishment and migration. I have made a brief survey of various movements, which are basically agrarian in nature, but I'm skipping that part. The experience of fulfillment already on this earth can be understood in terms of communion with the divine, the tribe, and the entire cosmos. Qualities such as simplicity, truthfulness, honesty, joviality, etc. are associated with the Adivasis, but in the face of problems such as indebtedness, land alienation, drinking, displacement, migration, corruption, exploitation, oppression, etc., it is not easy for the latter to maintain their traditional qualities. The problems of the tribes at present are in the same direction with a lot more subtlety and complexity. The question of identity, for instance, is as relevant as ever. It is in this context of their relationship with other communities, either dominant or subservient. The issue of the tribe's identification with the Hindus is a major problem. There are other similar problems which come as blocks to their realization of their fulfillment here on earth. Now, I enter into the second part of my presentation, which I spelled out at the very outset in terms of fulfillment in Parom Disum or Merkha, which in English is translated as abode of God and ancestors. So therefore, fulfillment in the life beyond. Death is not an end, but a beginning of a life very similar to the earthly life. Otherwise, how could the Adivasis explain the rituals of the dead before the burial? So they have elaborate rituals of the dead. We have no time to go into all that. Doesn't matter. Ek Mankhna, that's Kuduk or Orao expression. Ek Mankhna or Kuha Benja among the Oraos. Ek Mankhna is to, in Hindi it will be Chaya Bhitarna. to bring back the shade of the dead. Koha Benja, big marriage in Kuduk, in Urao language, once again, among the Uraos. Umbul Ader among the Mundas, meaning the same thing. Kaman among the Khadiyas and so on are the rituals of the deceased, and they point to the Adivasi belief system of longing for and fulfillment in a communion with the Supreme Being called by various names. There is also an experience of corruption, injustice, insensitivity, pollution, exploitation, and all that is evil, bad, disgusting, frustrating, anti-life, etc., that make human existence apologetic. We can recall the whole concept of suffering and evil that we have studied in our theology. So therefore, in the context of the tribes as well, these are some of the experiences which they grapple with, the problem of suffering and evil. So this situation needs to be rectified by the continuation of the cosmos for the perpetuation of the entire humanity. The regularization of human life is alone in harmony with nature and neighbor. Important, harmony not only with nature, but also with neighbor in order to get salvation or liberation. If they die in a state of conflict with both, then we'll see what will happen to their understanding of liberation. Anything evil, for instance, evil eye or evil mouth that may have a negative impact on their children, cattle, and crops could be neutralized by bhak khandana in Kuduk, which means neutralization of the effect of the evil eye and evil mouth. Evil eye and evil mouth are very bad for them. So, but they have a ceremony to neutralize these effects of evil eye and evil mouth. Thus, focus of Adivasi life is prosperity, which brings happiness in terms of bumper crops, bumper cattle, and marriage of the adults and multiplication of human beings all over Satpatti Raji. Now, let's look at the body, from the body to the imperceptible self. So their understanding of the self, their understanding of the relationship between the self and others. Scholars like Hoffman and Van Exum have analyzed the constituent elements of the human being in the Munda tradition. The four constituent elements of the human being in the Munda worldview are the following. One, horomo or horomo, that means body. Two, man, mind, or mon, that means mind or intellect. Three, ji or jiv, that means soul. And four, roa. Roa means the imperceptible self of the human being. So these are crucial to the understanding of the human fulfillment. Horomo, the first element, is the body produced by the parents. It is flesh and blood, composed of various organs, eyes, ears, hands, legs, nose, etc., and other parts of the body, for multiple functions. Mon or man, mind or intellect, is responsible for thinking and reasoning. G is the life principle infused by God at procreation or conception. It is seen in the creation myth where Haram is like God, okay, puts G into the, G is life, G or Jiv, life, into the clay figure, as we have in the Bible, in the clay figure, and makes it alive. G is intimately connected with the body. It grows, matures, and becomes old with the aging body. What is of importance here is the Munda belief that the G is immortal. The body dies, but not the G. At death, a person's body returns to the earth, but the G goes to Param Disum, the world beyond, to the heavenly abode, or to Bitarpur, the inner dwelling. Bitarpur is inner dwelling. It goes to the inner dwelling. It is either punished or rewarded there by Singbunga. So let's understand this. If a person is in conflict or dies in conflict with the tribe or the supreme being, he is punished and he doesn't attain salvation or liberation. So now let's look at some of the rituals, and they are very rich in theological interpretation, and I'm sure we'll be able to have a deeper understanding of the tribal ethos and death worldview. For the Munda, even after death, the Roa or Umbul is the disembodied soul continues living. On the basis of this belief, only the spirit of the deceased is brought back through a ceremony called Umbul Ader, or sheltering the spirit. There is a ceremony among the Mundas called Umbul Ader, or sheltering the spirit, which is conducted 7 days after the burial. The Umbul Ader ceremony marks the homecoming of the deceased person. This sets all the fears to rest as the spirit of ancestors. The philosophy behind the Umbul Ader ceremony and its feeding at the grove every evening is that in death, the spirit of the dead becomes an outcast and the family has to feed it separately until the spirit is sanctified. So until it is sanctified, it's still in a state of outcast, ostracized. This is automatic. This shows a spiritual solidarity among the dead and the alive. The Umbul Ader ritual is not just an empty rite. It is indeed a symbolic action of the Munda religious worldview. The immortal Roa, which is known as Umbul, till it is taken into the Ading, becomes Ora Bunga. Ora Bunga. Bunga is the spirit. Ora is house, the house spirit. So they have spirits of various kinds: village spirit, house spirit, forest spirit, etc., river spirit, etc. So here we are talking of the house spirit. It joins the ancestors in the Ading and stays with them forever. It is united with Singbonga through the union with ancestors. So that's salvation for them. It prays to a Singbonga for the welfare of the family. In response, the head of the family offers its rice and curry in the Ading and expresses the relationship with the deceased, who has now become the Ora Bunga. So the dead has now become the household spirit. So that's his part of the family, though invisible, but he or she is very much part of the community, part of the family. Sorry. The ritual of Jangtop or Jangtopa, or the second burial, they also have a notion of second burial, symbolizes their continuous solidarity with the departed ones. Now, the sacrificial victim symbolizes a living worship to Singbonga and a living memory of the deceased. The function of the ritual is to unite the Mundas and strengthen their bond. This is also a reminiscent of the eternal happiness and a state of bliss after death. It is also an occasion for purification. This reminds one about a great future, a hope for eternal life, happiness, and eternal fulfillment. Thus, life here on earth is full of hope and promises, because there come union with Singbonga and the deceased ancestors is a matter of joy and happiness. Thus, the Munda fulfillment is attained through this very calm union. I'm coming to the last part of my presentation. According to Dehon, he was one of the scholars who did enormous work. He was a Belgian Jesuit priest. Two main rituals of the deceased are very symbolic and significant, which will help us understand their worldview better. Chaya Bhitarna or Ek Mankhna, calling back the light shade and of the departed into the house. So they call back only the light shade, not the heavy shade. The Kuman, or the reuniting of the heavy shade with the shades of their ancestors, are reminiscent of the tribe's come union with the ancestors and the Supreme Being. So therefore, light shades are brought back to the house, and heavy shades are also united with the ancestors, but not at home. Now, this is important. Death is always mourned, whether it is an old person or an infant, whether it is a natural death or unnatural. The difference, however, in the case of unnatural death is that there is fear in the minds of the Adivasis. The one dying of, they call it, remember, Dubal, Tangal, Pasal. Dubal is the one who is drowned. Dub gaya, drowning. Somebody who dies of drowning. Pasal, Pasna, Pitna, or hammering. If anybody dies of murder, or Tangal, if somebody dies of committing suicide by hanging himself or herself. So then these spirits, the spirits of these deceased, turn into Muabunga. Muabunga means harmful spirits. So they make a distinction between good spirits and bad spirits. Okay, so therefore those who die unnatural death become bad spirits, harmful spirits. Such people have no hope of fulfillment. They cannot be saved. They cannot be liberated. Thus, there is hope only for those dying a natural death. In the category of unredeemable spirits come also the infants who have not been formally incorporated into the tribe through the initiation ceremony called Chilan. This is one of the criticisms of some of the tribal groups, because children, if they have not received, let's say, or they have not been incorporated into the tribe by names giving ceremony, then they are not given the burial in the common cemetery or burial place along with other members of the tribe. So they are considered outcasts. So this is an area of criticism. Children have not committed any mistake. And if they die in childbirth or even before their name giving ceremony, why should they be punished? Anyway, but I'm not going into those complications. Yes, those dying in a state of chilan or ostracism are also, however, in the case of a natural death, is that there is fear in the minds of the people. Such people have no, sorry, I have already said that. Those dying in a state of chilan are also meted out the same treatment of ostracism or excommunication. Decision of the panchayat. Panchayat is a confederation of villages or elders who come together. So they decide. So their decision is the final in matters relating to tribal identity. A person endangering tribal solidarity and peacefulness by way of violating taboos is bound to be excommunicated. It is like public conviction. Parapulil mentions 3 kinds of punishment among the Oraon, Santhara, and Munda tribes. 1, ritual separation by birth or death in a family. 2, ostracizing from the community for such crimes as intertribal marriage, theft, etc. Remember, there is no notion of an Oraon getting married to a non-Oraon or outside the Oraon tribe. So, but if anybody does that, they consider this as a violation to the law of the tribe, and the person can be ostracized. But there are also ways and means to bring the alienated persons back, but we'll not go into those details. Now, ostracizing from the community for such crimes, total exclusion from the community for marriage with non-tribal, also called adultery. In the wake of any of all or all of the above, reconciliation is a communal event, which is important, reconciliation. So they'll be reinstated, which is a very significant part of their worldview. And in the event and experience of reconciliation, there is fulfillment. So the event of excommunication is symbolically neutralized among some tribes by killing a fowl or a goat and the excommunicated drinking the victim's blood. This is the reincorporation into the tribe or community. This is also an emancipatory sacrifice. Panchayat represents the community. The Sarpanch receives water or beer, rice beer, from the culprit's hands, symbolizing readmission and acceptance. Since the separation is communitarian, reconciliation too has to be a communal event. The Mundas have a belief that a bad person cannot obtain happiness after death. The bad are deprived of the community of the ancestors. The separation from the tribe is the greatest punishment for the tribes all over, either it be the Mundas, the Oraons, the Khadiyas, or the Hos. It is the experience of the hell for them. For without the tribe, they fail to attain the destiny set for them. Thus, to conclude, liberation is not individual, but through the tribe or the community only. There are as many religions, tribal religions, and cultures as there are tribes, and each group has its own religious system within which they are governed. Hence, the concept of human self, human world, and existence are specific to each tribe. There are surely some commonalities and differences, but there is no concept of a tribal notion of salvation, which is generic. And therefore, the notion of liberation or salvation is restricted to each of the ethnic groups that we speak about. Now, it's open to your queries and clarifications, and I'll try my level best to respond to your queries as much as I can. And the floor is yours now.